Today, we're on May 2nd, so we're one day after May Day, but we are celebrating May Day and then also with that Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And I'm sure many of you are well familiar with the history of May Day, but just a brief refresher. May Day, also known as International Workers' Day, is a celebration and a remembrance of the struggle of workers in May of 1886 and the Haymarket Affair in Chicago. And this day is celebrated across the world, much more than actually here in the US. And it was a struggle for the 8-hour workday, where you had a general strike that was called, where at that time, most workers were working between 10 and 16-hour days, 6 days a week in terrible working conditions. And so you had militant trade unions, socialists, anarchists, and other working people who called for a general strike. And it ended in a general strike and a rally, mass action, as well as mass repression in Haymarket. And so the trade unionists, the socialists, the anarchists who waged this struggle in 1886 understood the importance of struggling for a shorter working day. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours to do what we will. And they understood the importance of struggling for a shorter working day, not only in terms of what it means immediately, in terms of having more leisure time, having more time to tend to our family and friends, but also what it means for building power across the entirety of the working class. Because the more that labor time is spread across the entirety of the working class, the less the ruling class can leverage those of us who are underemployed or unemployed against those who are employed, and those who are stretched in their employment. So the struggle for the working day remains something important today, and like other things that we're struggling for, such as Medicare for All, are of strategic importance when it comes to uniting the entire working class and building leverage for us across the entire working class, both those who are employed and those who are unemployed and underemployed as well. May, of course, also marks the beginning of Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and the month of May was chosen because the first recorded Japanese immigrant to the US was recorded as coming in May. And then May also marks the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, which was largely built by the labor of Chinese immigrants. And what this really tells us is that immigration policy in the United States has always been driven by the ruling class's pursuit of an immigrant workforce that can be hyper-exploited, and at the same time used to leverage against the workers who are here today. So all the more today, as we celebrate both International Workers' Day and Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, we see the importance of building, forging lines of solidarity across the entire working class, both in terms of here in the US between immigrant and non-immigrant, also over lines of recency of immigration, but more importantly as well across globally, across borders, because we know that the ruling class does a good job of organizing itself across borders, across nationalities, to fight against those of us who have to work for a living all over the world. And in the same way, we have to forge the bonds where together we can wage struggle against the ruling class. So with that, we'll go ahead and introduce a number of our panelists here today. So to start off, we have David Monkawa, who will be helping us moderate the panel today. David is a former Assistant National Director of Organizing for California Nurses Association and National Nurses United. And so David, as part of the organizing team, contributed to expanding their organizing into 16 states, including 6 right-to-work states, and helped multiply the membership from 80,000 in 1998 to 150,000 here in 2020. We also here today have Allison with us. Allison is a nurse at Providence St. John's Medical Center in Santa Monica. And so Allison, along with 9 of her colleagues, all of them registered nurses, were suspended for demanding PPE or personal protective equipment prior to treating patients. And so she's been one of the main speakers at the rallies that the St. John's nurses have been holding in terms of demanding first PPE and then demanding reinstatement after their suspension. And we're very happy to share that all 10 nurses were reinstated on Wednesday, April 23rd. We also have with us today Tini, who is a nurse at Kaiser LA Medical Center, also known as Kaiser Sunset, where there's about 1,000 nurses. And Tini's worked there for almost 20 years. She currently works in the step-down unit, which has a legal ratio of 1 nurse for each 3 patients. And that's one of the main things that nurses fight for in their collective bargaining contracts is the nurse-to-patient ratio, which means the nurses are able to provide better care for every patient. And so that very much matters. That's both the issue in terms of for the workers, but it's also as an issue for us on the patient side as well. And then we also have with us Adam Diaz, who's the organizing director at the Warehouse Workers Resource Center. And along with Adam, we also have a number of others from the Warehouse Workers Resource Center, Rico Maniujo. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your names. And then just a little, and then we have 2 workers who are working in LA County distribution centers or LA County Amazon distribution centers. And they're gonna go by Andy and James today. And so a little bit more about what's going on with the Warehouse Workers Resource Center and with Amazon. The Warehouse Workers Resource Center is a worker center. So like kind of a different way of building worker power outside of traditional trade union structures. And the Warehouse Workers Resource Center is organizing efforts to create new standards to protect the health and safety of workers in the industry, and really doing some amazing shop floor organizing using militant minority techniques, really direct shop floor action, stuff that we think of when we think of the Wobblies. You know, it's real good stuff right there, and we're seeing it happen across the US and Amazon warehouses everywhere. And so just a little more in terms of what's going on in Amazon. In Amazon's, we've seen in other countries, Amazon workers some of them are unionized and have wage strikes over the years, especially in Europe. But here in the US, it's a different struggle. It's even more of a challenge. But we are seeing a militant response from Amazon workers all over, whether it's in New York, now here in LA, and we've seen it elsewhere as well, in Minnesota. And so we have over 130 warehouses where over 100 workers have been infected, and at least 1 worker has died in Hawthorne, California. So really today, we're gonna hear from a number of workers who are on the front lines of this COVID-19 pandemic, and also who are working in industries that even before COVID-19 have always been very strategic and key in our economy. So logistics and healthcare. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David, who's going to kick off our panel today.
Thank you, Felix. Hi, everybody. You can all hear me and see me? Cool. All right. I hope everybody's fine. And, you know, I know it's trying times, but I hope you're fine and healthy. And I'm going to introduce Allison here. Allison, let's see now. Yesterday, May Day, the nurses, 139 hospitals nationwide in 13 states. 95,000 nurses were involved, covered. So far, unfortunately, about 60 have sacrificed their lives so far. And down here locally, USC Keck Medical Center, UCLA Medical Center, Arcadia Methodist, Good Samaritan, LA Medical Center, Kaiser, and St. John's Providence. So Allison, what's going on and how come they're not giving you what you need?
So what had happened was myself and my colleagues, we work on the med-surg unit at St. John's. For a few weeks, it had been turned into a COVID unit. That meaning we were treating specifically persons under investigation for having COVID whose tests were still pending, and patients who have tested positive for COVID. At first, we were using airborne precautions, and then eventually we had switched to droplet precautions. So airborne precautions means that we use an N95 respirator that filters out 95% of airborne particles so that we can be safe from any airborne particles that are sneezed or coughed into the air. And then it was moved over to droplet precautions, meaning just a simple surgical mask. So at the time, we had a lot of trust with our hospital, And so if our hospital said that these paper masks were safe enough, then maybe we were safe just using these paper masks. That kind of all changed when we had a nurse test positive for COVID, who is convinced that she contracted it from work, who will state that she did contract it from work. And that same week, multiple doctors, I think 5, had talked to the nurses saying, hey, I wouldn't go in there without an N95 respirator myself. Why are you doing that? They were surprised to see us with just the simple surgical masks. So the nurses took a stand and they said, hey, I don't feel safe without an N95 respirator. Please give me one. And despite the hospital claiming many, many times that they have more than enough supply, they refused to give us one. This came with a direct order to accept our patient assignment as is with just the simple surgical mask. And then it ended with our eventual suspension. The night I was suspended, I was told, we have the N95 respirators, just not for you, just not for your level of care, which was, again, very bizarre because at that point we were exclusively caring for COVID patients. And doing multiple actions, we were supported by our union. We are, proud members of California Nurse Association. During multiple actions, we had some nurses from other floors of our hospital telling us, oh, when I asked for an N95, it wasn't really a problem. Some of these nurses were not even treating COVID patients. So that came as a surprise to us. The N95 respirators were being so policed on us when we were treating these patients. And we were just so surprised to hear that other nurses on other places or on other units were receiving the masks without question. And so that left us with a lot of questions why, a lot of wondering why it's being done this way. And we just endlessly are asking for transparency from our hospital, which we have yet to get. We wanted to feel safe taking care of our patients because we didn't want to, 1, get sick ourselves, or 2, become carriers, taking it home to our families, the people that we live with, taking it to the grocery store with us, taking it inside of another patient's room who maybe was under investigation for having it but didn't have it. That poses a danger for all of them, because if the nurses aren't safe, the bottom line is that the patients aren't safe, our families aren't safe, and the community isn't safe.
Now, Allison, what were the reasons they gave you that they don't want to give you the PPEs? I don't understand. I think what the public wants to know too, they can't get it into their heads that, I don't get it. How come they don't give nurses masks? It doesn't make any sense. So people are wondering, what are the reasons?
So the CDC, so what one of the leaders had told me the night I was suspended was, we don't have to follow any rules that aren't listed by the CDC. So although Cal OSHA dictates that we should be receiving an N95 respirator, our hospital states that it's only following the CDC guidelines. The CDC guidelines, the CDC weakened its guidelines to droplet precautions, but it did say a respirator is preferred when available, and they are available, which was our question. But just in general, the CDC weakening its guidelines was pretty irresponsible, and we don't really agree with it. During a situation, a pandemic like this, we should really be strengthening our precautions and not weakening them.
Exactly. So the hospital is saying that's basically an excuse, right? Because if they wanted to, they can make it as high as possible or as low as possible, the ceiling. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now I'm going to put you on hold for just a second and get over to Tinny, who's across town here at Kaiser Sunset on Sunset Boulevard. Everybody knows where that is. That's a long time, that's in the hood. That's right there by Hollywood Presbyterian, in Echo Park area. So Tinny, you had a big event out in front of Kaiser last week, and I believe yesterday as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you've been wanting to get PPEs, your staff and everybody has been wanting to get PPEs, and what's been going on there?
So yeah, so I before I start, I do work at a COVID unit. At the beginning, they wanted to keep our unit clean, but eventually, the number of COVID patients increased. So actually more than half of my unit is now COVID. So yeah, we did have rally. It started about 2 weeks ago, and we did have a big one yesterday for May Day. So as a result of this COVID pandemic, we do have an increased patients requiring isolations. So the hospital, they kept changing the requirements of the protective equipment. First they said, oh, we listen to CDC, CDC said this, so we're gonna follow them. Mm-hmm. So they keep giving us inadequate protection by reducing the access to PPE. So if we need that, we need to, hunt down the charge nurse, all the equipment, they are locked in their office. And also they're reducing the amount of PPE. They tell us, oh, you only get one eye shield for the whole shift. You get one pair of shoe covers for the whole shift. So basically we're cross-contaminating. We as nurses, we take care of our patients, we get out of the rooms, but we do have to go, from point A to point B, and we're walking on the same shoe covers. And they're not giving us the right mask. They say, oh, it's not airborne, it's droplet, so this is the mask we use, but it's not protecting us from the COVID-19. So we started with silent marches, and we have candlelight vigil last week, observing social distancing, and we have our masks on. And we spoke to the media, several nurses. I myself did speak to the media. And then we ended it with car parade yesterday. There's a mass action yesterday for May Day, and we had signs on our cars. So that's what happened.
I see. Okay, now in the case of St. John's, you held a rally, a couple of press conferences, and you were able to get reinstated on Wednesday, April 23rd, I believe. What was that like for you, Allison? What was that like? How did you feel when people that you didn't even know came out and texted you, emailed you, and they were like hollering and honking their horn? How did that make you and the other nurses feel?
It was so great. We, as nurses, we kind of struggle to put ourselves first, and it was kind of a struggle for me myself, personally, to not feel selfish for making this decision to stand up for my safety. But seeing the overwhelming response, positive response that has come from other people toward these nurses that took a stand, it's been really great. It gives me the confidence that I stood for the right thing, that what I did is going to make a change, and it was great in a time that has been filled with so much anxiety. That was a bit of light in it all.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you guys are a real inspiration. We innocently put the cause on our website, and I believe we got like 6,000 hits or something in a few days. And of that, like 1,500 or something, there was like people are like acknowledging it and doing stuff. So it was quite surprising. Getting back over to Tinny. Tinny, what's the current status now with Kaiser? You guys have made a lot of demands. What are they going to do? What did they say? Did they say anything?
Okay, I'm sorry. What was the question, David?
The question was like, okay, so when they had a few of the rallies and people coming out and supporting car rallies and press conferences, they were able to put enough pressure on the hospital for them to rehire the nurses, reinstate the nurses, and to start giving out PPEs. And I was just wondering, what has Kaiser done after your demands were heard?
Well, after several exposure to media, Kaiser management did reach out to our union. We are our union, Nurses Association, and we did meet with them, and they're willing. They're finally giving us. They're finally not hiding the N95 from us, the mask that we need. But they still say, oh, it's the supply is limited. We do expect you to reuse the mask. So the last time I worked, which was yesterday, I did take care of COVID patients, and they said, and I worked 12 hours. So they said, here's your mask, and we need you to put it in the paper bag at the end of the shift. We're gonna put your name on it. We'll spray it with hydrogen peroxide gas, and you will have to reuse it the next time you need it. So that's where we are right now, and it's not good, but we still have a lot of problems. But at least Kaiser is willing to talk.
I see.
They weren't communicating with us before, so
that's good.
Yeah.
So at least you got them to listen, to meet, and to acknowledge your demands, and to actually say that they're going to fix it, but they're foot dragging. They're dragging their feet, and they're going hem and haw and stuff like that. Is that right? I see.
Yes.
Now, if you be patient for a while, I'm going to shift over to James or Andy, the two Amazon workers that we have on here, who do not have a union, but they're fighting very hard to protect their safety and health, like everyone else. So, Adam, would you be able to kind of give us a little intro and bring in Andy and James into the conversation here?
Yeah. So what we've got is a situation, as Felix shared earlier, and again, thank you for allowing us to be part of today's webinar. The way Jeff Bezos has set up the company in that classical neoliberal model really skirts around basic labor protections and labor laws. A lot of their business is with independent, misclassified drivers that don't have minimum wage, that don't have workers' comp protections, etc. A lot of the vans you're seeing driving around are third-party contracted companies, even though they're all Amazon delivery folks. This way you can't organize that way. In the warehouses, and we are throughout Los Angeles County now, you're seeing a turnover rate anywhere from 100 to 190% annually, meaning a whole new workforce every 6 months to a year. And that's obviously set up in a way where you can't work. The other thing they really rely on is a lot of temporary workers, which we've seen corporations use largely in third world. That's rolling around here now because they all have the same playbook. So despite these odds, and then I should also mention that the injury rates, even before COVID-19 pandemic, anywhere from 11 to 17 of every 100 Amazon workers suffers injury in the workplace because they're working at the pace of a robot and being monitored and surveilled constantly. Despite all those odds, though, we have workers who are standing up, who are making very, very specific demands. And, we've got two folks today, and Andy and James, who've been willing to share their stories from somewhere in Los Angeles County and what their demands are, what their feelings are around safety and ongoing concerns. So turn it over to them. Okay, so whoever would like to go first, maybe if Andy wants to go first, go for it.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know where to begin a little bit, but I think, thank you, Adam, for that. I think it's important to acknowledge that, as I'm sure we're all aware, this has been, health and safety at Amazon facilities have been, it's been a big issue for us before COVID, and COVID-19 has just made everything way worse. So I think some important, basically, a big thing that's happened at where I work is, they've made a lot of changes. They've upped our pay by like $1 or $2, and they've given us relaxed attendance policy, and there's all these sort of little measures that they've taken, but the big issue is that and one of the main things is they're trying to keep everybody 6 feet apart at where I work, but the big issue is that this is not keeping us safe, and they're also, all of these things are ending now, or they're coming to an end. So they started about a month ago, and actually as of yesterday, the relaxed attendance attendance policy. You know, they basically were saying before, if you felt sick, stay home, but now that's no longer, as of yesterday, that it's back to the normal attendance policy. And, you know, it's not like this pandemic has gotten, you know, has changed much since a month ago. And I think the other thing I really want to stress about, like, where, at least where I work, is the, you know, they really are really trying to keep everybody 6 feet apart. You know, which some studies I've seen say that even is, there's, you know, who knows how good that is actually in keeping us safe, but it's just impossible in the work that we do to stay 6 feet apart from everybody the whole day. And some of that it has to do with, you know, just people being people, but the actual work that we're doing is, you know, no matter what kind of like stickers they put on the ground to keep people 6 feet apart, it's just, you know, like there's a certain amount of like lifting and you know, lifting heavy things, and the aisles that we work in are very narrow. So if you ever need to, you know, go in and get something from an aisle that somebody's in, you know, it's totally impossible to stay 6 feet apart. And, you know, if you ever just need to pass by anybody, go to the bathroom, you know, you're oftentimes breaking that social distancing. So it's totally, you know, it's pretty, you know, what they're doing, you know, I appreciate it in some ways, but it's not anywhere near to what, you know, is actually going to keep people safe. And for example, actually, one of my good friends at work has got sick. He doesn't know if it got COVID. He wasn't able to get tested, but, you know, it's just, I think, you know, as, you know, they said that we've only had 3 or 4 cases at my facility, but it's definitely clear that there's way more people who are sick than are actually, you know, being reported to us. And whether management knows, or, you know, it's just, you know, so I think a lot of people are scared, you know, but, you know, we have to work as well. So it's just not a great situation.
I had a question for
Yeah.
you, Andy. Do they tell you the numbers of people who are ill from COVID? They don't tell you that.
So they sent out, you know, text messages. I think we've gotten 2 or 3, but I've also been, you know, I've also found out partially from, you know, talking to other people. I've definitely found out about many more, you know, people who have gotten ill. And, you know, when we had in LA County, we had somebody die from an Amazon manager, and we have not been informed of that at all. So
that was in Hawthorne or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. And many people don't even know that, you know,
right.
that has happened, or so in some ways, yeah.
Let me ask the nurses.
Yeah.
Allison or Tinny, has management told you, like, giving you like updates on how many people, how many workers are ill and that kind of thing? Have they done that?
Yes, David, this is Tinny. So yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because actually Kaiser is being very, how do I say it? They just want to keep everything secret. As a matter of fact, we as the nurses and the union, we're the one policing. Like we have a nurse who's positive for COVID in my unit, and the union had to help her with, you know, with getting help, with getting paid correctly, and I myself had gone to my manager and said to her, you need to trace this, you know, whether or not it's a patient or a nurse, they need to trace which among us were exposed, and they don't have that system in place. And they get upset. They don't like us bringing up this problem. But we're spreading it among ourselves and to our patients who are not COVID.
Right.
So they're not, David, at all. They're trying to cover it.
Right.
Yeah. The same as for St. John's. We have found out about multiple nurses on my floor, as well as others who have tested positive, but we did not find out through any system in place by our hospital. We had to find out through the grapevine from nurses, you know, from the nurses themselves, or just about the numbers of people that we know are infected from other units. It's been hard. St. John's did have in place a system of signing in and signing out of each room, so that if a patient does test positive, they could possibly call us to inform us that we have taken care of a patient who has tested positive or has not tested positive. But that system even is flawed. I took care of a patient knowing that that patient was already positive. And then a week and a half later, I received a call saying, hey, just want to let you know that this patient has tested positive. But you'd think that with an efficient system, they would have known that I had already known that while I was taking care of the patient. And for this call to come a week and a half later, that's almost an incubation period. I don't know how much that's going to help me at that point.
Right. That's pretty scary, isn't it? I mean, when you think about taking care of, patients who have COVID, that's pretty frightening. Just wanted to get back over to James and Andy. So
real quick,
yeah, go ahead.
To give you an idea, what we've got right now is in these Los Angeles distribution, they're processing 30,000 packages a day, and then these drivers are delivering to 200 households. The way Jeffrey Bezos has set it up, they're not set drivers in a neighborhood, so a different neighborhood every day. And so we've got this situation. We know that the virus lives on cardboard 24 hours, plastic and metal 3 days, and that these vast warehouses, you're looking at millions of square feet, have not been closed for cleaning. So my understanding is we've got workers with significant demand. So definitely want to turn it over. And by the way, James and Andy, these are not their names. You may have heard that there's severe retaliation, so they're appearing as aliases for their own protection. You got workers demanding safety, told that they're essential to the economy and keeping this country going, and they're getting fired for demanding to be safe at work. So for James and Andy, you want to talk a little bit about some of your demands? Go for
it. James, you want to go, or?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I can jump in here. Yeah, and I think just to quickly add to what Andy was saying, I mean, I know as recently as the beginning of April, we were not even being given masks. Only in the last 2 weeks have they also mandated that people can wear masks, and this is in a facility of hundreds of workers. And sometimes too, they haven't had masks. When you come in, they run out of them. So yeah, no, it's quite appalling. But yeah, as has been said before, we've already had a number of confirmed cases, but afterwards, it's very unclear what actually happens, what gets cleaned, what the protocol is. So we're demanding that when there are confirmed cases, that the facility has to actually shut down the workers for at least 2 weeks. We also, I think one of the main things, as Andy touched on before, is that essentially they're trying to implement some want us to process the same volume of packages that we were doing under normal conditions. So essentially, they're just making the work harder with, it's harder to breathe when you're wearing, restrictions on movement, which are good, which help protect us, but then we still have to do the same workload. So we're demanding that they relax their standards, so that we actually have time to do things even as basic as go to the bathroom, take breaks to wash their hands, because as of right now, for the most part, you are, the entire time that you are on the clock, you breaks, and then it's very, very grueling and very hard to take a step back and take any time to take care of yourself. And yeah, and also one thing that I think is especially ridiculous is we, very poorly for the intensity of the work that we do. We've been given this extra $2 temporarily, which we're now being told they're going to take away in the next 2 weeks. in terms of the overall risk and the overall situation. And in fact, we're demanding that we get time and a half hazard pay for all employees throughout this period of crisis.
Yeah.
A number of other demands.
For the audience, in terms of what James is talking about, this extra $2 an hour that's being cut, Jeffrey Bezos himself has made $24 billion since the COVID-19 pandemic started, just the CEO alone. And yet they're now saying to workers, you now need to come in. You don't have access to unpaid leave. These are folks saying, we want to forego a paycheck because we're scared to come into work. That's stopping. So now if they don't show up, they're going to lose their job. And now the $2 an hour. And these are folks that, you know, they felt the pressure. Amazon, they've raised it to $15, but that's it. They were making $17, but as of May 16th, that's going to be it also. And then you contrast that with Jeff Bezos. So, yeah, other questions, David, for them? By all means.
Yeah, I want to find out the reaction to Minnesota, Shakopee, Minnesota, because the Amazon unit there, they won a huge victory, from what I understand. I was reading about it actually, that they got a fired worker who was on strike back, and the company agreed that division or that workplace agreed to a safety committee for workers with worker leaders. And
Yes.
I just want to get your response, Adam, as well as the other two gentlemen.
Yeah, so to give you a little background, the Minneapolis and Eagan, Minnesota folks are part of our national coalition called Athena, and that was launched the week of Black Friday, and coincided with an action at a sortation site here in San Bernardino, California. And yeah, that's the model in Minneapolis that's really inspired quite a few folks. And they've engaged, as Felix has said, outside of the context of the National Labor Relations Act, unionizing and so forth. And I like what's been said in terms of bringing it back to the IWW or the Wobblies. I probably turn it over, Rico, our senior organizer, if you want to sort of share some victories or some things you're talking to folks about regarding Minneapolis and how they're inspiring other workers. Share a little background or your feelings on Minneapolis, if you could.
I mean, when Minneapolis, demanded like free parking. If we're gonna go back here in LA County, workers demanded for the PPE. So I guess that's our first win, because when workers were asking about it, that's when Amazon just started giving out PPE. So we have to teach them that there has to be a demand, or this Bezos guys aren't gonna give it to them. And we're just doing it slowly like that, and networking. And there's definitely isolationism here. They don't really talk, but we have to encourage them, because that's the only way for them to win, right? To collectively, work together.
Yep. And real quick to further answer your question, David, what they were able to do in Minnesota is by law create health and safety committees. And the issue is, if folks don't know, Amazon workers have what's called a rate, and that's short for rate of productivity. They are tracked by devices in these warehouses, the amount of scans, the amount of items they pick, the amount of items they pack in bags with either handheld devices or scan guns. And they have a rate of productivity which is tracked by an algorithm. So, for instance, in these large fulfillment centers, it's not uncommon that a worker needs to pick 225 to 275 items an hour. And the idea is, when there's these massive quotas of constant repetitive motion, where their coworkers are literally robots that are bringing them these objects, people are suffering sprains, strains, and tears. And like we've talked about, 11 to 17% of the population are suffering injuries. And so health and safety, more than ever, this is before the pandemic, was an issue that workers needed to have a voice on. And now that we're seeing workers on the front lines called essential workers testing positive, not being told, now more than ever, Amazon's being exposed for their poor health and safety record. So questions, David, from you for our workers again on the health and safety stuff, by all means, go for it.
No, I think that.
Oh wait, just to jump in really quick, thank you for sharing that rate, Adam. That the 220 that to 250, that's what it is and where I'm at. And just to share, you said earlier, like we're being asked to process 30,000 in a night. I think usually, at least where I'm working, last night it was actually at the plant we had like 100,000, and it's usually more like in the range of 90,000 for the whole facility. So just to give you a sense of what we're being asked to do. And the other really quick thing about the strains is there's a lot of bending down. So there's a lot of like, at least for me, there's when you're bending down, it really hurts your back. And there's a lot of like low bags where you stow the items down low. And so if you're in, luckily I'm younger, but as you get older, it's really tough on the back.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because in California, nurses have one of the highest back injury rates of all occupations. And the reason for that is because if you look at nurses, in the urban centers, they're mainly Asian Pacific Islander, right? And they're not like 6 feet tall. So you have the greatest disparity between nurses who are 5 feet, 5'4", something like that, and patients who are way over 200 pounds. So that's the reason for it. But I just want to get back to Allison and Tinny. I want to know, I know, Allison, you have a shift to cover, so you got to leave pretty soon. But I want to know from you, why is it that you have a healthcare system like Providence, which made like $2 billion a couple years ago? They have like 16 hospitals or something. Why is it that they can't afford masks? Why is it that they're not prepared? It's just odd that, why is it that they're not prepared? And it's the same as in Kaiser. Same thing with Kaiser. Kaiser made $5 billion in only half a year. Well, why is it that these people don't have it and they're not prepared for any of this? Maybe I can get your opinion.
So I have only been a nurse for a year, but from what I have seen and what I have, talked to amongst my colleagues about, it seems that profits, although they should have no place in healthcare, they do. And that's a very unfortunate reality that we have to fight to make right and fight to bring justice to. But the answer is, I don't know. We do know they have a lot of money. We do know that there is a real cost of masks. And although that the costs are being inflated, there is money available. We won't ever really know. But again, profits have no place over people in healthcare.
Tinny, what do you say? You've been a nurse for a long time. You've seen pretty much a lot of things happen. In your opinion, why is it that the Cadillac, the General Motors of all healthcare, Kaiser, does not have enough masks?
Right. So I know Kaiser. They're known to downplay things when something like this happened, just like Ebola a few years ago. They don't listen to their nurses, and they claim that, oh, you overreacting, you're taking out of proportion. I mean, Kaiser is basically a healthcare corporation, and their bottom line is profit. We all know that. So if they could pinch a penny, they would. And, every day healthcare workers get infected with COVID-19. And you would think that giving us the appropriate PPE would be number one in their agendas, but it's not, sadly. So I don't think they're not. I think they're unprepared because it's their choice. It's not like they should, as a hospital, as a big healthcare system, they should be prepared for something like this. And it's not like it hasn't happened before. So it's their choice. It's money. That's what's wrong with the whole system. This greed, corporate greed.
About a couple of decades ago, they started doing things like eliminating hyperbaric chambers. That's a chamber that they use for burns. Okay, and they say, we don't use this a whole lot, It's not making any money. Why don't we get rid of it? So they got rid of it. Before, every hospital used to have an epidemiologist. But then they figured, you know what, we don't use these people that much. And as far as just keeping the hospital clean, we can do that ourselves. Why don't we get rid of them? So this is before California fires became like 500% meaner and, you know, bigger due to global warming. And this is before Ebola and now COVID. So apparently all these hospitals, because of what you said, Tinny, and because of what Alice said earlier, profit, they got rid of everything that's not really making a lot of money. So, you know, inventory-wise, if it's not making money right on the spot, let's get rid of it. And it seems like Amazon's done the same thing with a lot of the ways in which things are stored. They get rid of everything if it's not worthwhile making money, and everything is based on just-in-time inventory. Is that right? If it's not like, if it's taking up space, it has to make money right away or they get rid of it. That's what it seems like to me. Whether it's healthcare, you're helping people, or whether you're moving cardboard. They apply the same principles, it seems.
I think it's absolutely true. The just-in-time nature is especially evident right now. You know, these donations of masks have come just in time. The process for cleaning the mask, it's going to happen just in time. But even though the situation has been building up, you know, the COVID situation has been building up since January, they had a lot of time to gather the supplies necessary, and they didn't show up until we were already, you know, they were already knee-deep in protests and faced with media attention. Right.
And it just seems to me that with Amazon, you know, whether it's Amazon or nursing, they all started to, or teaching, they all started to apply the same principles. They want everything to be standardized, you know? So like with nursing, they began to introduce computers, robots, to think for nurses and do assessments. So instead of nurses like looking at the patient and deciding their color of their face and adding up a bunch of things, they started having these computers where you just punch the vital signs into, and the computer would kick out how much hours to treat them and what to do. Now I know, Tinny, you would remember some of that back in the old days, but that's how it started. And with robots coming into factories, same thing. It started just about the same time because the hospitals, they really took a lot of their planning from General Motors and auto. So they applied a lot of the auto principles to fix up people. And it made a lot of money, but in the meantime, a lot of people died unnecessarily in hospitals. Tinny, do you remember any of those early things where they started changing everything towards like standardization and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, computerized charting. That's, you know, it's about reimbursement. That's what I feel with Kaiser, at least. You know, I've stayed with Kaiser for many years. So everything that's computer, you know, it's easy to track us, and they just want things to look good on paper. You know, they don't care what kind of bedside care. As a matter of fact, most of these managers, they look at your charting, you know, and then the computer charting makes it easy, and it's everything about the meeting the numbers and meeting the quota, meeting the reimbursement, which is money.
And standardization.
Yes.
You know, they want to standardize testing for kids to meet the market. And they want to standardize patient care so it's more, you know, conducive for the market, basically, I guess, whether they're students or patients or customers. With James and Andy or Adam, can you comment on some of the things that, like, what they've done to make things faster and faster, and that's more dangerous? Because basically, you know, it's the same as all the other professions. And then I just want to ask you guys, the two and James and Andy, as well as Allison and Tinny, I know you both have events coming up, right? Like I know at St. John's, there's a car rally again on Tuesday. So if you could talk about how the public can support you a little bit, and how, you know, how some of these, with the Amazon folks, if you could talk a little bit, like what the nurses were saying about how, you know, they start to speed things up and how it has a bad impact on you. You could talk about that and a little bit of the support efforts that you want people to find out about.
Yeah, just, I mean, as far as speeding up, I think like what Adam mentioned, at least where I work, there's, we have to do stowing of packages, and, you have like usually like 6 or 7 aisles, and you have to do, you have this handheld scanner, and it tells, and you basically, you have to do, 220 around, maybe more packages an hour. So whatever that math is, I can't do that. But I know a lot of people, like, a lot of people have developed strategies of like dropping the packages for the low bags so that you don't have to bend over, and just kicking them in, and just basically finding shortcuts in order to make that rate, because it's just really, it's really hard, and there are people with computers they have these little computer carts that they go around, and they tell you your rate, for if you're doing that job. So it's a pretty clear, I don't know, it's pretty clearly not very human, I guess. But as far as helping out, maybe James, you could take that. I can also answer that in a second. I'm just trying to pull up this Facebook page that I can link, but
go for it, James, in terms of either your speed up and tracking or solidarity. Please go.
Yeah. I mean, I think that actually there's just so many parallels, like we've been talking about overall, about kind of the lack of logic overall, in terms of people's health and well-being, with how both in healthcare and in logistics and shipping things have been structured, but how it's all just based on maximizing profit, especially around the just-in-time systems. I mean, when we say we work in warehouses, it's not in the sense of things are really stored there for any significant period. It's more like processing distribution centers where everything comes in every day and leaves. It's not going to stay there for more than a couple of days. Everything is, like it says, just in time. So in the hospital setting too, right? I mean, I would think that, I would hope that every head of every major hospital chain would know that at some point there's going to be some sort of pandemic or something where you need massive stockpiles of PPE, of masks, of everything. But again, it's just not profitable in terms of very short-term, quarterly profits. So it's done away with. And I think similarly to that is, the introduction of like this lean production, right? Where basically they try to cut corners every which way and try to just push workers to their limits, both in terms of number of workers and especially in our case where most, every job is essentially you are tracked in real time of how fast you're working, and if you are not going fast enough, you can be disciplined and even fired. So yeah, I mean, this is by far the most physically intense job I've ever had. It's just so they're really just trying to push you to the limit of what's possible, and that's why it's no wonder that people are only here for maybe 6 to 12 months, because it's just, even if it's a decent salary and everything, which it also isn't, but it's just physically impossible. So I think all around they're just really trying to cut every corner possible, and I think it's really important to hear also firsthand what's happening in the healthcare sector and make these connections with shipping and logistics as well.
And maybe Rico, if you want to jump in on some of. Now, Rico is our organizer on the ground, in fact, at Hawthorne. And Hawthorne is the warehouse where the first recorded death of an Amazon worker unfortunately occurred. That worker was Filipino-American. And Amazon, we filed a formal complaint, our organization, with both Cal OSHA and the Department of Public Health over these things. And Amazon has denied in the media this typical kind of racist narrative, saying he was on vacation in Mexico and implying that he caught it there. And we're looking at an employer now where they are systemically telling people not to tell each other of cases, and then additionally are delaying announcements. So Rico, you want to share some of the support the community or folks on this call might be able to join in on in terms of solidarity for your campaign. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean that's true. Like Adam said, all the workers that I talked to, there's a lot, like hundreds of them, right? They're not all on the same page. It seems like every time somebody get like the COVID, they want that secret, like what happened to the Filipino guy named Jerry when he got the virus and died. When they talked to the managers around him, these are like 30 administrative. They were told not to tell the drivers. So that's messed up because the drivers go out there and deliver these packages, and the COVID can, live in the surface for 3 days. And then when I talk to drivers, when a worker whistleblow the situation, texted everyone. Some are calling me liar, but when the next day they found out it was true, that's when I get like a lot of calls and getting more information. As a matter of fact, 2 days ago, another worker, I hope it's not positive, and I hope the dad is not positive also. So because it's workers, they go home. Yeah, definitely we want the community support, because from my experience and also involved in the Philippine movement, that's the only way to really stop this type of exploitation of workers, is to get the community support. And the community are affected by this. Everybody's just relying on the essential now, and who are delivering the essentials. One of them is definitely Amazon, and it's not true that, according to this manager that I talked to, that they're only delivering what they said. Oh, drivers only deliver about 115 boxes a day. So when you talk to the drivers, they just like, are you kidding me? I deliver like 250 bucks a day, and we're also delivering non-essentials like DVD or other stuff are just too ridiculous to even mention. And they were saying, oh, we only deliver like 50 pounds of box. And this worker's like, hell no, I just carried this water. It's like 250 bucks. That's why I almost got injured. So it's really terrible. And the only way, like I said, please spread the word and, support these workers, because capitalism, it's intensifying their exploitation. It's not going, it's getting worse every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Dave,
can you tell people how they can support you?
Well, there's a petition that's going around. We're texting this. We can also forward that. And if they know an Amazon worker, and there's more detailed information, what are the demands? Basically, extended sick leave, permanent, increase of the pay. Well, right now, their HRs is really terrible, because a lot of workers, they staying home, and when they want to go back to work because they're not getting paid, they want to get paid. By the end of the day, it's this extreme condition in America. If you lose your job, you become homeless. Yes, we're doing that petition, and we need your support spreading that word.
Thank you so much. Allison, I know you have to go to work. Can you tell people how they can support you? I know there's a rally on Tuesday.
Yes, so one of the immediate ways that you can support the nurses is by signing our petition as well. You can find that at protectnurses.org, protectnurses.org. And we are trying to, and you can join us for a car caravan that is happening on Tuesday. I'm trying to find the details really quickly, but I cannot find them right now. I will forward them to David, who has joined us for one of our caravans previously. And I can send those details to him. So hopefully you can join us. That caravan is to basically tell our hospital that we are still fighting for transparency. We're still fighting for the real numbers of how much PPE we have. We still are fighting for being included in the conversation. Administration is making a lot of decisions that affect us, but we don't get a say in it. And we want to be included in that conversation. We are also trying to take a stand on how we don't want to be using recycled masks, because we don't really support that process. We don't really know enough about that process to know that it will completely be cleansed of the COVID virus, for one, and two, we don't know if it's potentially introducing us to carcinogens that we are then breathing in for 12 hours. So that's another thing that we are looking for by going to this rally, and you can show us your support there. I believe in our first car caravan, we had 60 vehicles, many of which were from the community, which was great. And so, yeah, we will send over the details, and hopefully you guys will be able to come. The other thing is just asking the Trump administration to fully enact the Defense Production Act. It is partially enacted, but a lot of that is being used to manufacture ventilators, which is very good because, you know, we need that in some of the more dense areas where this is heavily affected, such as New York. But we want the Defense Production Act to be fully enacted so that we can get more manufacturers to produce PPE. Because if we have PPE, one, we would not be faced with a lot of these situations that we're dealing with now. And two, we won't get to a number of a high infection level as we would if, you know, the nurses and the healthcare workers and other workers weren't adequately protected. So yeah, we'll send over the details for the caravan, and please sign up for protectnurses.org. I've got to get to my shift, but thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much for speaking and being here and making yourself available, Allison. And good luck to you. We'll see you on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Tinny?
Yes, David.
Yes. What can the public do to support you? And what kinds of events do you have planned?
Locally, I know that on Wednesday we have an event in LAMC outside. We try to do tabling. Of course, we observe social distancing just outside Kaiser on Sunset Boulevard. So we basically, yeah, we take donations. As a matter of fact, in my unit, we have few nurses who have churches giving us N95 masks, because like Allison says, you know, we don't believe in re-cleansing the mask, and it's the same mask that we've been using for years. It's a one-time use mask, and it has always been a one-time use, and now they expect us to use it for 3 shifts, and they're not made to be reused, and they're papers. So as soon as they get a little moisture, and you know, we have to breathe, we have to talk. So we feel it that the mask gets, you know, moist, and it's not effective after a few hours. So not to mention 3 shifts, that's 36 hours. So that's what we have at the moment. And of course, you know, for the public, if you're a Kaiser member, I know that they, you know, maybe you can email, you know, your member services and mention about PPE, because it is not just Kaiser Sunset. This is, and I know it's a fight of every nurse at the moment, and it's not just Kaiser Sunset. Kaiser is every Kaiser, and I have friends who work at a Kaiser. It's just they're going through the same thing, and as public, you know, in public, you know, practice social distancing, wear your mask, stay home, stay healthy, and to prevent surge. We're not at that point yet, and even though we're not at that point, we're already struggling with our PPE. So we can't imagine if we have a surge with the amount of PPE we have.
What day was that? You said Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday, I believe the 6th, May 6th.
May 6th.
It will be. Yeah, it will be from 10:30 to 12:30.
Okay. So
we're keeping our event short, just because, you know, we don't want no gathering and all that. So it's short, but frequently.
Okay. So for the public, Wednesday, May 6th, from 10:30 to 12:30. That's Kaiser Sunset on the corner of Sunset and Edgemont. St. John's Medical Center, corner of Santa Monica and 20th Street. That'll be Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, May 5, I believe. And that will be 10 a.m. Most likely it's going to be 10 a.m. I'm not positive until Allison gets back, but most likely. Okay. I just wanted to add that some of the things that we're talking about, where, you know, both like in Walmart, Amazon, or with nursing, with all the hospitals and healthcare, this lean, mean production, this effort to squeeze every single thing out of workers from nurses, and just, you know, increase speed, increase profits, bottom line. This all started happening during Reagan's time, Reaganomics. That's what it was called. And it kept going on and on. And when some people from the other side, some of the few Democrats started adopting it, they called it the consensus, the Washington consensus. And union busting was a part of that. So that's when this all started. Now they call it neoliberalism. They don't call it consensus anymore. But this is the reason why, whether it's Walmart or hospitals, workers are being attacked. They feel the same kind of thing, but there's a tremendous amount of upsurge and positivity. And as James and Andy has said, and as nurses have said, people are fighting back constantly. And I just wanted to kind of now open it up for questions and answers, and actually any comments. So that includes people on right now. That includes Tinny, James, and Andy.
Hey, David, real quick, I just wanted to share
sure.
our website. So Los Angeles has an alliance, AmazonWorkerAlliance.org. So that is up. Yesterday, we had a 40-plus car caravan at Hawthorne, part of those workers in their public filing of safety complaints with the state and Cal OSHA. And folks can check out that website. There will be more actions coming up.